A guest in UATV English studio today, John Paul Sweeney, a British investigative journalist and an author who worked for the Observer newspaper and the BBC's Panorama Newsnight series. After 17 years at the BBC for Panorama, Newsnight is now a free spirit up for the right kind of trouble, as the internet puts it. He has written 12 books, co-authored Investigation into the Assassination, Murder on the Malta Express, which in December 2020 won a National Book Award in Malta. The latest thriller of the author is The Useful Idiot about fake news in Stalin's Moscow in 1933. Well, my question to myself is already, why don't I give already the icon a chance to speak for himself? Hello, John.
Hi, hello.
How are you?
I've hurt my knee. I fell over in Kyiv. I had been delivering crutches and I fell on black ice in Kyiv in early December and I tore my knee tendon and suddenly I realized I needed some of the crutches I've been giving away.
Well, oh my God, what an irony. What an irony.
But by the way, just to be boring, you've missed out my latest book, which is called Killer in the Kremlin.
No, I didn't. I did it on purpose. I'm about to mention it. I know. Yeah, so again, John Sweeney wears many hats. I love that yellow thing that on your head is right now, but I noticed it in Buena Vista, actually, in Kyiv, where we first met, when the war only started. So, John Paul Sweeney, who is he? Why Ukraine?
I went to Chechnya in 2000 as a reporter for The Observer, and I saw Russian war crimes with my own eyes twice. I went once in February, once in June in 2000. And in March 2000, I wrote a piece for The Observer, my then paper, in which I just said that Vladimir Putin was a war criminal. No one took a blind bit of notice. George W. Bush and Tony Blair were kind of in love with Vladimir Putin, but I think they had got it horribly wrong. I also, at the same time, investigated the Moscow apartment bombs in September 99, in which around 300 Russians were killed. And Putin blamed Chechen terrorists, but the evidence was overwhelming that this was actually a black operation by the KGB, new name FSB, and that Putin had murdered Russians deliberately to make himself look strong and good. And I thought no good could come of this man. And what was dispiriting was that everybody in the West, they'd become obsessed with the war on terror. And essentially, we put fear of radical Islam, and it is a problem, and it does cause trouble for us, absolutely. But we put that problem, which is, I think, it's a big and nasty problem, but as a strategic threat to the West, to the Western democracies, Vladimir Putin's Russia is a far, far bigger threat. And what happened when it looked as though in early February 22, the Russians were going to do the big war against Ukraine. Right. I was sick of Westerners running away from Vladimir Putin and let him getting away with murder again and again. And I came to Kyiv and I told myself, all I need is a hole in the ground and a bottle of Irish whiskey.
Well, as my dear friend Cormac Smith puts it, is Russia is a mill of lies producing the product on an industrial scale, isn't it?
Yeah. So there was something about the lying and also the killing. So there are three moments for me where I think the Western appeasement monkeys made terrible mistakes. The first was the poisoning of Litvinenko with polonium-210 in 2006. Britain reacted, and by the way, Litvinenko at this point was a British citizen. Britain reacted by expelling 4 Russian diplomats. Now, all that Putin had to do was press play on his printing machine 4 times. There's of no consequence to him. Then in 2014, there is the seizing of Crimea, but also the shooting down of MH17. And 298 people were killed, including 10 Britons. And that is the moment when I actually went and doorstepped Vladimir Putin. I met him face. But again, our reaction to that tragedy was we did far too little and we let Putin get away with it. Then again, poisoning happens. 2018, when they try and poison Sergei Skripal with Novichok, and they do succeed in killing Dawn Sturgis. And again, what we do is we kick out more diplomats this time, but Putin doesn't care. He just press print on his printing machine and publishes more diplomatic passports. So the reason I support Ukraine and the reason I came to Kyiv and I stayed throughout the whole of the Battle of Kyiv is I was sick to death of people like me running away from Vladimir Putin.
Killing the Kremlin, my next question. Is that a novel, isn't it?
It's not a novel, but some people who've been kind enough to say it's been a bestseller. Some people say it reads like a novel, but actually what I do is I take all of the people who I think Vladimir Putin has had killed. And it starts for me, and you can actually go earlier, but it starts for me with the killing, perhaps, or the death of the Sobchak, the former mayor of St. Petersburg. He was the mayor by day, and Vladimir Putin was the mayor by night in the 1990s. Then, by the way, if you look at the Litvinenko poisoning, it seems pretty clear that a number of people were killed in Russia first. One of them was Yuri Shekharchikin. Another was a guy called Roman Sepov, who was a St. Petersburg gangster that Putin knew and dealt with back in the bad old days in the early 90s. And then a third was a Chechen warlord. All three had tea with the FSB. All three ended up dead. Their skin fell off, their hair fell out, etc. The same symptoms that Litvinenko had. Then you've got Anna Politkovskaya, who was poisoned first on the way to Beslan and shot again and again and again and again. Now, Ukrainians and actually Chechens don't have to read this book because you know it already, but it's very important for the Western appeasement monkeys to understand you cannot deal with this guy because he's a serial killer. And what was so depressing is in 2022, you would see endless Ukrainian cars with Yeti in Russian kids written on full of bullet holes, the windscreen full of bullet holes. These are war crimes. Attacking civilian refugee targets, shooting them up, that's a war crime, no question. And that's what the Russians have done on repeat. We cannot trust the Kremlin. We cannot trust the Russian army to behave like the rules of war. For example, something that still makes my blood boil is that the Ukrainians allow the International Red Cross to inspect Russian prisoners of war, and they're well treated in Ukraine. And the Russians do not allow the International Red Cross access to the Ukrainian prisoners of war, and so they're tortured and treated horribly, and many of them dying. And the chasm between these two ways of behavior is dark and deep. And we should say in the West, right, if Russia doesn't follow the rules, then we should take the $300 billion in Western banks, this is Russian state money, and we should give it to the Ukrainians to defend themselves and to make good their country after all of the desecration that Russia has put it to. Still, the Americans are seeking, they don't want to escalate. Are they joking? Are they joking? Come on. Russia should not be allowed to attack Ukraine, and Ukraine be forbidden from attacking Russia. Now, these things are getting better, but still, it's nonsensical. Ukraine, having been invaded twice, is perfectly reasonable for it to be given rockets and for those rockets to try and hit Moscow. Because if that happens, then the Russians may get it, and then they may stop targeting Kyiv or Dnipro or Kramatorsk or wherever the Russians fancy targeting.
Yeah.
But I'm frustrated because all of our rhetoric is good, but actually in terms of delivery, we've overpromised and underdelivered. We are in danger of betraying Ukraine. Putin is a dictator, and like Hitler, who he's resembling more and more, He believes in triumph of the will. What matters to him is I'm going to take Bakhmut, and therefore he is pushing the kind of the zombie masses of the Russian army, the Russian killing machine, the people under his thumb. He's pushing them to take these places on a map, even though there's no military logic to it, because it just shows the dictator's will is being performed. And the problem is far too many democratic leaders in the West
Absolutely.
don't want to come to that conclusion because it costs so much money, for example, to start reopen tank factories and ammunition factories and really get going on the drones. However, my point, and you already know this because you're a Ukrainian, is that money is far less precious than blood. And at the moment, we're putting money ahead of blood. Now, because obviously the people who are doing all the fighting at the moment are the brave and good Ukrainians, and boy, is it costing you
Well, there we go.
a lot of blood. Well, the Ukrainians, so my friend Bovodamchenko, who arrested me for being a Russian spy on day 2. Do I look like a Russian spy? Well, clearly I did. Anyway, we've become great friends. But he and his friends, they've been fighting like tigers to save Ukraine. And yet the people in the West are fiddling about and faffing about. We're not doing enough on sanctions. By the way, I have been very depressed. Certainly the back end of 23 was very depressing because, the counteroffensive failed because we didn't give the Ukrainians the right material. We didn't give them the planes in time. We've given, a couple of hundred tanks. You've knocked out 2,000 Russian tanks, and they've probably got about 8,000 tanks left. The number of Britain has given 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. That's a tiny number. It's a tiny, tiny number. It's ridiculous. So we've got to do much better. I was cheered, by the way, on for the second anniversary, February the 24th. There was a big demonstration in London. There were demonstrations across the States and Europe, the whole of the civilized world. So I think ordinary people are still in the West are still very, very sympathetic to Ukraine and want Ukraine to win. But there's a problem in the politicians. They look at it and they go, oh, yes, we'll give Ukraine, we'll stand by Ukraine. All the rhetoric is good. The delivery is not good. And about that, we should hold the West politicians, we should hold their feet to the fire.
Just a thought crossed my mind recently. So, if I would be Volodymyr Zelensky, what would I do to deliver the message? So, can I readdress that question to you, Mr. Sweeney? If you would be Volodymyr Zelensky, how would you deliver the message to politicians, to those you call appeasement Western monkeys or the appeasement monkeys of the somewhat civilized West? What would you do?
I actually can't think of doing it better than he's done it. The problem that Ukraine has is if they appear to be ungrateful, then it's possible the trickle of aid will actually die even more. So Ukraine is in a difficult position because if it says in plain English, for fuck's sake, pull your finger out, then that might have an opposite effect. But it is frightening. For example, the number one, the scariest thing is the possibility that Donald Trump will get back in, and I worry about that. I think I'm looking at the polling numbers, and although at the moment they put Trump ahead of Biden, it's also true to say that Trump's doing very well with his MAGA base, but Republican independents are not going with him. So he's getting the fanatics, but not the people in the middle, and he needs the people in the middle to win. So I'm a little bit optimistic that Trump won't win. I might be wrong about that. But this is very scary. The reason why it's in the West's interest to challenge Vladimir Putin and to stop him and to help the Ukrainians and give them everything they need is because Vladimir Putin is destabilizing us. I think Brexit was helped funded by dark Russian money. Certainly the Russians helped get Donald Trump elected in 2016 and are probably having a bloody good go right now as well. And we are effectively at war with Russia. Russia is at war with us, and we don't know it. So we've got to get our thinking caps on, and we've got to stand up to Russia. And the best way of defending the West, the best way of defending the United Kingdom, is to arm Ukraine.
Dear Mr. Sweeney, thank you very much. You are you're charming from your head to toes, because I mean, and all you do and what you're writing is absolutely stunning and is so captivating. It was John Sweeney, many things. He wears many hats, as you probably have seen. He's a writer, he is a journalist, and he stands for Ukraine actively. I wish some of European politicians do the same. That will help a war won sooner by Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine, and thank you so very much. Hope to see you soon, guys.